Um, well, welcome all of you to this special meeting of the Higher Education Coordinating Commission. Really appreciate your taking the time to join us for this. Um, and I think, Guthrie, we start with a call to order.
Yes. Thank you, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the Commission. I will call roll. Greg Heyman.
Present.
Emily Simnett.
Present.
Demetrius Davis Boucher. Michael Dembro. Richard Devlin.
Present.
Helen Edwards. Arnel Fajardo.
Present.
Evelyn Coker. Devin Lawson.
Present.
Teresa Martinez. Eric Nijue.
Present.
Jen Proctor Andrews.
Here.
Mary Middleton.
Here.
Jennifer Smith. Gail Yamasaki.
Here.
Thank you. That is roll call, and we have a quorum. I will note for the record, a few folks joined late, and I just need to promote them so they were not able to enter the roll call, but they noted it, and I will reflect it in the record. We are ready to proceed.
Well, Guthrie, thank you very much. I wanted just to review the agenda. Note that unlike some of our other meetings, we have one agenda item, a rather important item. It's an item that has timing associated with it as well, since our action is required in advance of the legislative session. I also want to call your attention to, perhaps you've had a chance to already review it. We did receive a letter from the governor regarding sort of our role with regards to working with and I think guiding the work of our higher education institutions. And I think personally, I find her letter to be encouraging of the direction we're taking, and helps me to have a sense that there's sort of, I think, a growing sense of opportunity to move forward. And thank you for that. You have a number of other posted items on the agenda, and I think that with that we will move into our public testimony. I want to remind our people providing testimony that we have time limits of 3 minutes, and Guthrie will be keeping track of time for us. So who do we have first, Guthrie?
First up, Mr. Chairman, will be Rick Bailey. Rick Bailey.
Good afternoon, Chair Heyman, members of the Commission, and Director Cannon. For the record, my name is Rick Bailey. I've had the honor of serving as the president of Southern Oregon University for the past 4 years. I want to share with you some of my thinking around the HECC report on university spending. We stand at a threshold where the arithmetic of the past no longer computes for the reality of our future. I've reviewed the report before you today on financial efficiency, and while its data is diligent, our vision must be more daring. Ultimately, we must ask ourselves whether what we are considering actually addresses the root cause of our challenges here in Oregon. For the last 4 years, my institution has lived the quiet, painful discipline that this report discusses in theory. I've had to make dizzyingly complex decisions that have reduced our faculty and staff workforce by 25%. Let me say that again. In 4 years, I've made decisions that have eliminated 25% of our team members. Imagine that happening at any other state entity or organization. And these were not mere efficiencies on a spreadsheet. They were colleagues and mentors who were doing great things for our students, our university, our region, and our state. We didn't do this to survive the past. We did it to inherit the future. The word efficiency is mentioned 79 times in your report, but the real question is what does efficiency look like? And is it really the contention that our institutions aren't efficient? SOU offers a great example in both the staff to student ratios and faculty to student ratios on pages 26 and 27 of your report. As of the 2022 data in your report, and as a reminder, this is before we made all of those difficult cuts, SOU was operating at 7.1 students per staff member and 21.1 students per faculty member. On those two metrics, it makes us the most efficient university in the state and far more efficient than the national average for universities. And again, that was before eliminating an additional 25% of our workforce. And in fact, all 7 universities are more efficient than the national average in both categories. Our colleagues are all doing similar painful work. And so we have to ask, how much more efficient should our 7 universities be? Efficiency is a tool, but it's not a destination. If we view financial stewardship merely as a series of subtractions, we will eventually subtract our way into irrelevance, and that's a bad outcome for Oregon, where our economy and workforce are struggling. Efficiency may be the floor, but transformation should be the ceiling. My university has leaned into the wind. All of us have. We've trimmed our sails, painfully so. Now we ask the HECC and the legislature to help us catch the gale of innovation. Let us stop managing the decline of old models and start financing the birth of new ones. Let's not distract ourselves from the true nature of a crisis that we as a state have allowed to develop over the last 36 years. Our students do not need a leaner version of yesterday. They deserve a bolder version of tomorrow. Thank you, Chair Heyman and members of the commission.
Thank you, Rick.
Next up, Chuck Hoffman. Chuck Hoffman.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Well, hello, everyone. Chair Heyman, Commissioners, and Executive Director Cannon. My name is Dr. Charles Hoffman. I serve as Chair of the Eastern Oregon University Board of Trustees. We certainly appreciate the Commission's work and acknowledge the challenges facing Oregon's public universities. However, our board has some serious concerns with some of the components of the draft recommendations and the spending and efficiency in Oregon University's report. Of course, we share the goals of affordability, efficiency, and long-term financial sustainability. As a matter of fact, over the past decade, EOU has had some of the lowest growth in the total cost of attendance among Oregon's public universities, and we recently implemented an 8.4% right-sizing reduction in our operating budget. But we believe that the call for institutional integration, including potential mergers or expanded centralized control, is premature and could harm our regional universities. It assumes inefficiency where discipline already exists, and it risks imposing one-size solutions onto institutions that have fundamentally different missions, different scales, and different geographies. The report also points out academic program growth. Our board regularly reviews the financial outlook for new and existing programming to ensure the university's resources are widely used. Much of the growth at EOU and at other universities reflects low-cost concentrations, certificates, and workforce-aligned pathways built onto existing courses, often with net neutral or positive fiscal impacts. These programs respond directly to rural healthcare, education, and technology needs, and thus we feel that reviews of academic programs must include university boards and use criteria that are mutually developed by the universities and the HECC. EOU strongly supports collaboration and shared services where they clearly reduce cost and improve value. EOU already is actively participating in the TRU and PSU Shared Services Initiative. Still, we oppose mandates that would erode institutional autonomy, weaken rural access, and destabilize universities that are already doing the hard work. We do believe that there are recommendations in the report that are ripe for development and are worth pursuing, including a salary pool to support our employees, technology updates to support our campuses and students, and shared services. These are all areas we're already working on. We look forward to continued collaboration with the Commission to strengthen Oregon's higher education system without sacrificing the institutions that serve its most geographically isolated and economically vulnerable students. In the end, as another Oregon University graduate has pointed out, The value of our institutions cannot and should not be measured by cost efficiency alone. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today.
Thank you.
Next up, Roy Haggerty. Roy Haggerty.
Yes,
Um,
thank you. Great. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Great, super, thanks. Chair, Commissioners, thank you for the opportunity to comment. In addition to my comments here, OSU President J.T. Murthy has submitted written comments. The report appropriately recognizes that Oregon's public universities serve distinct missions and communities. Those differences matter when interpreting spending, efficiency, and outcomes, and they must matter even more when considering policy responses. As Oregon's land-grant university and the state's largest public R1 research institution, OSU operates at a different scale and level of complexity, and I'm sure that the University of Oregon would say something similar in that regard. We have a presence in every county, deliver statutory statewide public service programs, and sustain a research enterprise that supports Oregon's economy, workforce, and communities. These responsibilities create structurally different cost profiles, revenue sources, and compliance requirements. Any analysis or proposed changes have to account for those differences if Oregon is to make sound policy decisions. And I have to say the universities would have preferred to have a more active role in the development of the process and report. For future collaborative efforts to succeed, universities must be at the table from the beginning, co-designing the framework, not reacting to it as we are here. Treating institutions as true partners will improve outcomes and reduce implementation risk. Many recommendations would require substantial upfront investments in things like IT systems, administrative platforms, and organizational structure. Any serious evaluation must realistically weigh those upfront costs against projected savings. And Oregon's not alone in looking at these issues. As recommendations are considered, the state should learn from other states' experiences, what actually worked, what didn't, what were the real upfront costs, and were the projected savings actually realized. And finally, I respectfully request an edit to recommendation number 2, which proposes that academic degree programs be periodically reviewed and renewed by HECC. Academic program review is essential, and we do it, but it has to remain institution-led, meaning by our boards. Universities' shared governance processes protect academic freedom, rely on disciplinary expertise, support accreditation, and reflect the diversity of institutional missions. Moving academic review to HECC would undermine shared governance, require new expertise at the agency, thereby raising costs, risk politicization, create accreditation issues, and raise complications with faculty and staff collective bargaining, for which HECC is not responsible. I instead recommend the following edit to recommendation number 2. The legislature should require academic degree programs at public universities to be periodically reviewed by each public university's board of trustees using review criteria mutually developed by public universities and the HECC. Thank you for your consideration. My comments are offered in the spirit of protecting Oregon's long-term educational, economic, and research activity as we move forward.
Thank you.
Next up, Kwabena Boakye. Boakye? Perhaps we can return. AJ Romero.
I'm here.
Jim. Oh,
Can you
yes.
hear me?
Yes, we can. Please proceed.
Okay. Chair Heyman and Commissioners, for the record, my name is Kwabena Boakye, Vice President for Finance and Administration at Western Oregon University. I have 20 years of higher education working experience in fiscal operations with previous roles at the California State University System, University System of Georgia, and in Washington State. Therefore, I bring fresh eyes and perspectives to my new role at Western. For context, our student population is 82% Oregonian, 50% first generation, 27% Latino, 42% students of color, and 41% Pell eligible. Currently, Western is the only public four-year Hispanic serving institution in the state and committed to sustaining the momentum. I appreciate the opportunity to comment on the spending and efficiency report and acknowledge efforts by commissioners and HECC staff to prepare the report. The report is insightful, revealing evidently that Western, like all public universities in Oregon, have been fiscally responsible stewards of state resources. In the past 10 years, public universities have significantly increased degree completion per 100,000 in spending. At Western, it increased 71.4%. The affordability rate, which is the percentage of students whose expected costs are greater than their ability to pay, has dropped by an average of 14% across public universities. Also, in the past 10 years, Western held operating expense growth to only 3.1%, which is below the annual national average of 4.4% and inflation of 3.6%. Our public universities continue to do more with less. Though state funding has increased in Dallas over time, that funding has been decreasing proportionately, and now Oregon ranks 46th in the nation in state funding for public universities. All universities are making difficult choices to balance budgets, and Oregon needs thriving universities. As a major employer with 77% of its budget in personnel, Western is an economic engine providing needed opportunity for socioeconomic mobility and economic development within the region. In conclusion, we welcome recommendations 3, 4, and 5 in the report and appreciate efforts to increase funding to our public universities. With increased resources, we will continue to meet state expectations. Thank you for your consideration and your service to our state.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, AJ Romero Jamel.
Hi, Chair Hammond, Vice Chair Simnett, Executive Director Cannon, and members of the Commission. For the record, my name is AJ Romero Gimmel, and I serve as the Graduate Student Trustee at Portland State University. I began my higher education journey at Portland Community College before transferring to PSU to complete my undergraduate degree. I chose PSU not simply for its affordability, but because they understood my specific needs as a transfer student. During my undergraduate years, I had the privilege of serving as the voting student trustee. Now in my master's program, I was honored to be reappointed by the governor into the graduate student seat. As someone with the lived experiences of being an undergraduate transfer student, graduate student, and a voting trustee, I intimately understand the ways in which Oregon's public universities approach cost efficiency. I've seen PSU consistently do more for students with less. PSU has shaped my professional and personal development in ways that I don't believe would have been possible elsewhere. Each of our public institutions is unique, and these differences allow us to meet the workforce, research, economic development, and innovation needs of diverse regions across the state. At PSU, we serve a high population of underrepresented, first-generation, non-traditional, and transfer students. Our academic offerings range from four-year degrees to certificate programs developed in response to the national interest in micro-credentialing and the goal of meeting today's workforce demands. As a board member and a student, I hope the HECC will be a partner to our campuses as they navigate the difficult challenges of ensuring long-term financial sustainability. We all share the same goal, serving the students of Oregon. Together, we should work to enhance the efforts already underway to support our students rather than introducing ideas that may inadvertently harm those efforts. Our board, as well as the boards at many of the other universities, is already addressing many of the issues outlined in the HECC's recommendations. Academic and non-academic program reviews, as well as sustainability initiatives, are projects that we are currently tackling alongside our campus community. The HECC has a unique opportunity to support each board in its fiduciary responsibility to ensure cost efficiency rather than duplicating efforts on these deeply sensitive and community-specific matters. At a time when the state investments are unfortunately not covering the actual current service level costs that our universities bear, resources should be targeted at uplifting our students and supporting our campus communities. Thank you for your time and for the opportunity to speak to you today.
Thank you.
Thank you. I will draw the commission's attention to 2.0A and 2.0B, which is written submitted testimony on behalf of the Coalition of Oregon Public Universities and Oregon State University, and move to our last sign up, Jarrett Gilbert. Jarrett Gilbert.
Thank you, Guthrie. Chair Heyman, Vice Chair Simnett, and Commissioners, Happy New Year, and thank you for the opportunity to share my public comment. My name is Jarrett Gilbert, and I serve as Vice President of Instructional Services at Columbia Gorge Community College, and I'm a proud member of Transfer Council. CGCC is a proud Hispanic serving institution, and while we're one of Oregon's smallest community colleges by FTE, our geographic reach is pretty large. We serve most of Hood River and Wasco counties, and our diverse student body further includes learners from Oregon's Frontier County, Sherman, Gill, and Wheeler, and from Klickitat and Skamania across the river in Washington. Given the historical role of community colleges in championing equitable access and workforce development, it's perhaps unsurprising then that our service area mirrors that of our Mid-Columbia Economic Development District. Like many of our students, I grew up in a family with limited financial means, but a deep belief in higher education as a force for transformative change. As a younger person, understanding what a degree could do for me was relatively clear. However, with the perspective of a career in higher ed, my scope has broadened to one of inclusive prosperity. That is to say, higher ed is a force for transformative change for self, family, business, and community. In our shared mission to support Oregon learners, our diverse communities, and statewide economic growth, the role of the applied baccalaureate degree offered by community colleges cannot be understated. When we examine labor market data, we see that many well-paying jobs require bachelor's degrees. When we look at costs to individuals to participating in that inclusive prosperity, we see the value of community colleges. And when we talk with students, school districts, WorkSource, employers, we see how important it is for local options that align with and are responsive to community need. Now, I'm grateful that our Oregon legislature has made an evidence-based decision years ago to bring to our state what's proven successful elsewhere, the applied baccalaureate degree at community colleges. Over the last year, I've had the privilege of working with my peers on my first such proposal in education. The process has been equity-minded, data-informed, highly collaborative. It's considered institutional context, partnerships, and transfer efforts to ensure our program complements and not competes with those offered by our four-year colleagues. And as importantly, it's prioritized the voices of our service area for a local option that meets student and community needs and drives transformative change. I believe that the BAS in Education Consortium has produced a thoughtful, well-aligned proposal that truly serves Oregon's learners. Thank you, commissioners, for your continued support of community colleges in helping Oregonians achieve their academic goals affordably and in advancing inclusive prosperity and economic growth across our state.
Jared, thank you so much.
Thank you. And that concludes our public testimony.
Thank you, Guthrie. I believe that then moves on to item 3.0, and I'll hand it off to our Executive Director, Ben Cannon, to present the topic to us.
Thank you, Chair Heyman, and thank you, commissioners, for being here for this special meeting. This is an action item, and so hopefully within the next 35 minutes, we'll get to that motion and a vote. And in order to promote your opportunity for discussion and in recognition of the substantial time that the Commission, and particularly its F&A subcommittee, has spent already on this report, my summary here will be brief and incomplete. But I do want, for the record, to summarize some key findings and recommendations in the report, and then hand it off to you, Mr. Chair, to lead the discussion. This report is the result of a budget note that the legislature adopted in 2025 during the legislative session. It requires us to evaluate efficiencies and spending trends at Oregon's public universities and make recommendations to the legislature before the February 2026 session. We produced an initial draft of this report in late summer. That was shared with university leaders. We've produced a subsequent draft, likewise shared with university leaders and with the F&A Commission. We've incorporated comments and feedback along the way. And then, of course, over the last 6 to 8 weeks, have worked with the F&A subcommittee and with our university partners to share and receive recommendations. And all of that is combined in the report that you have in front of you today. I think the public testimony that preceded this did a nice job of highlighting some of the key findings within the report and touched on a few of the recommendations. So again, I'm at risk of being too brief, but knowing that you all have read and spent time with this report already, I will simply note a few things. In terms of the bulk of the report and the finding, I think there's some findings. I think there's some really important and probably for many Oregonians surprising findings here related to spending and efficiency at public universities in Oregon. And in a nutshell, I think the story here is that our state's public universities do an excellent job stewarding state resources and actually have found ways to become more productive and more efficient than many of their peers nationally and many other public entities in Oregon, in spite of the considerable pressures that are on them on the cost side related to providing living wages for employees that keep up with rising costs for Americans generally, and in spite of the challenges that they've faced on the revenue front in terms of tuition revenue and state funding growth. So that's, I think it's important, and I really want to underscore, because you heard it in public testimony, that this report and the substance of this report is not intended to suggest that our public universities are inefficient with their deployment of state and tuition resources, and rather that they're doing an awfully good job. And that's detailed over many pages of this report. And just one, we compare, for example, spending growth with consumer-based inflation. We note that it has grown faster. The budget growth at our public universities over the roughly decade-long time period has grown faster than consumer-based inflation, but also quite a bit less than many other public entities and agencies in Oregon that are subject to cost pressures around, in particular, the cost of labor. And we recognize that some of the cost increases within higher education can be attributed to costs that are outside of institutions' control and come in conjunction with responding to state and federal requirements, for example. So I think it's important to understand that this report, and again, without going through those key findings, it really does attempt to underscore the way in which universities over the last decade have effectively managed costs in the context of a lot of challenges. However, when we turn to the analysis section of the report and we look ahead at the likely future facing institutional budgets in aggregate, our university budgets in aggregate, we see continued challenges. And President Bailey, I think, sort of hit the nail on the head when he said that the arithmetic of the past does not compute going forward. And when we take into account what we believe are realistic assumptions about institutional revenue derived from tuition and enrollment and the state investment, and we look at the continued likely pressures on the cost side of the equation, we are concerned and express concern within this report that in aggregate, our public universities will be required to continue to make very difficult budget cuts that create real challenges for the state and for their students. This report does not, turning to recommendations, does not have a silver bullet for those problems, right? We cannot, there's no single recommendation or set of recommendations that can simply solve those challenges. But we are attempting, through the recommendations that are contained in this report, starting on page 35, we are attempting to add some additional tools to the toolbox. And You've had a chance to review those. You know that the first of those recommendations suggests that the legislature should empower the HECC to work with public universities to bring back to the legislature potential proposals for deeper levels of interinstitutional integration, whether that's through additional shared services, whether that's through other forms of partnership, academic, student service, or otherwise between institutions. Bring back a proposal or proposals by 2027. Similarly, we make recommendations to the legislature regarding our responsibility, or the suggestions about our responsibility, the state responsibility for coordinating program deployment across the state, investing in IT through capital investments, and more. So I want to give you, the commissioners, a chance to respond to what you've heard, talk to each other, ask questions of me and staff. I want to thank Jim Pinkard and his team that have done so much to produce the report and the findings that are before you today, and really let you, Mr. Chair, take it from here.
Thank you so much, Director Cannon. I do want to issue a couple of comments of my own, for mostly just reinforcing what you've already said, Ben, but and then open it up. Hearing the public comment of just, I think one of the things that occurred to me or felt was that my reading of the report doesn't make impossible or any of the things that I think our institutions care about. I think that this lays a framework and I think, as you have been said, adds some tools to a toolbox to address a significant fiscal challenge, not for any individual institution, but for higher education as a whole. And I appreciate that. I also recognize that there's a sense, or I hear a sense, and I just want to sort of set a different way of. I don't see anything in this report that says this is what we're going to do. I think what I see in this report is a framework for future conversation and future action that is defined as collaborative with the institutions as we would move forward to try to address the kind of, I think a reasonable assessment of the data will indicate that we have significant financial challenge in the future, and to simply work with our current models and our current tools probably doesn't provide us with the things that we need in order to address that. I also want to say that there's nothing in this report that says we are going to be any less adamant in pursuing additional funding for higher education. This is not a statement that says, oh, we're not going to work on that anymore and therefore going to work on this. This says, no, we must continue to work on the securing of additional funding for higher education. But looking at the data, it tells me that we have to look at other things as well. And I think this report lays a foundation for that future work. It's not a conclusion, it's a beginning for the work that we need to engage in moving forward. So with those opening comments, I would like to open up to people on the committee. Yes, Commissioner Devlin.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would ask Ben actually to respond for staff to a question. We had the testimony we had today, and we've had previous testimony also, obviously. Some of it positives, some of it expressing some concerns, but only one actual specific request for an amendment to the report. It does appear that the report puts the role of actually evaluating the efficacy of academic programs within HECC. I do believe some of the concerns expressed there probably are real concerns expressed that might have some greater ramifications than we think of now. Without going to that requested amendment, is there a way to actually put this in the report in a neutral fashion without coming to any conclusions, in the sense that all academic programs should be, I'm not going to give you the words, should be evaluated on a periodic basis without specifying which entity at this point. And I'm not suggesting that, I'm only putting it forward. The other thing is, this is a report. It is not giving HECC this authority. Obviously, to have that authority, we would have to have legislation that passed, and all the parties that are concerned about this would have probably ample opportunity to testify about their concerns. So this is not a done deal simply because we put it in a report. I just wanted to get your reaction, Ben.
Yeah, I think you make good points, Commissioner Devlin, and I go back to what Chair Heyman said about the sort of framework nature of this and your acknowledgement that what we're presenting here are recommendations to the legislature that would be subject to continued conversation, negotiation, the legislature's perspective, hearing from other parties. Look, this proposal as written for the HECC to assume some responsibility for periodic program review and renewal would imply a significant new body of work for the commission. And we haven't thought yet deeply about the kind of implementation activity that would require at the staffing level in terms of partnership with the universities and their boards, the mechanics of how that would work. This recommendation is before you really to present sort of as a jumping off point for conversation with the legislature and to suggest that a greater level of coordination and ongoing review of how programs, academic programs, are deployed across our public institutions is one of the tools we can use to promote greater levels of affordability, access, and efficiency within our public system. So yes, completely recognize and accept that there are a lot of unanswered questions that would need to be answered about a recommendation, about this particular recommendation if it were to be adopted by the legislature. And I would encourage the commission to sort of approach that recommendation and the report generally in the spirit in which I think it's intended, which is to begin this conversation with the legislature, hand off to them a set of ways of thinking about higher education differently and the state role differently.
Thank you.
Any other hands, comments? I'm trying to watch. It's hard to do on virtual, but
We have quite a few screens, but it looks like Commissioner Coker has a hand.
thank you. I'm not seeing any of those, Guthrie, so.
Thanks, Guthrie, President Cannon, Chair Heyman. I'm very thankful for the analysis presented in these materials. And I completely understand that a lot of the efficacy that is attempting to be drawn here is the equivalent of trying to draw blood from a stone. We are the only Western state that has a majority of its funding coming from tuition, and it's not even particularly close. And I think that we can continue to try to optimize, and it behooves us to try to optimize. But like I've said at previous HECC meetings, we no longer have the luxury of importing our labor force anymore. Now that the trends of migration have stagnated to Oregon, we have a responsibility to the future of our state to develop our own labor force, to educate our own citizenry, to sustain ourselves. And I think that needs to start with a higher priority and investment in higher education that has been left behind numerous times over the years, from the Student Success Act to the first defunding of higher education during the Great Recession. That being said, I do think there is some merit to the testimony that has been given about the second recommendation in the report. I think that having the HECC alone review these degree programs sets a dangerous precedent for politicization of these programs, but also cuts out experts that at these universities that could contribute to the review of these programs, and also could put liberal arts programs that often have a lower quote unquote direct ROI in danger. And I think that these are extremely valuable programs for the state and for our citizenry that deserve to be maintained. And so I would love to see fairly heavy edits to this second point before I feel comfortable approving this report. Thank you.
Commissioner Dembro.
I
Commissioner
see
Dembro disappear?
it appears Commissioner Dembro has lowered his hand. I do see hands from Commissioner Lawson
Yep.
and Edwards.
No, Commissioner Lawson.
Thank you, Chair Heyman and Vice Chair Simnett. I did want to touch base on that second recommendation that Commissioner Devlin and Commissioner Coker just went over, just in case the legislature does ever look back at this meeting to see, what HECC deliberations occurred, to base any voting on that. I do want to make it pretty clear that I would not support that recommendation unless there was concurring situation between HECC and the Board of Trustees working on that together, as well as a council of faculty and classified staff working on that as well to provide input for that, because I think that their voices are extremely valuable in that decision, not just HECC and the Board of Trustees. I think that is extremely important and something that we should probably take up.
Commissioner Edwards.
Thank you, Chair. Ben, would it be fair to say that this is kind of an argument for some increase in centralized decision making?
I think it's, broadly speaking, I think that the analysis and recommendations here could be understood as pointing towards a need for greater levels of strategic coordination of our public institutions in place of competition. And it sort of suggests that the primarily sort of competitive model that for students and for revenue that has characterized higher education, at least the public universities, for a long time in Oregon. I would say predates the HECC, but certainly hasn't diminished and probably has grown over the last decade, should be balanced with a greater level of strategic coordination. And that's, I think, how to understand kind of the sort of themes of the analysis and recommendations.
I guess the reason I ask that is because that trade-off between the competition and some sort of central planning, for want of a better term, even though I know that's a loaded term, requires at least some sort of degree of a pretty strong hypothesis that it's going to be a better outcome. And sure, it's going to be a painful outcome to let the market decide and have institutions wither and fail. That sounds like a terrible idea. But I'd be anxious to know that we have a strong hypothesis that there's more benefit here than cost. If it's going to take an entire year to sort of polish a pencil on a framework, that just sounds like moving bureaucratic dice around. And in the meantime, I go back to what President of SOU said, people are facing very painful choices that make trade-offs between the role of education in the state and the role of any particular institution that sits within a community. And that troubles me.
Yeah, I mean, I share the concern, and I appreciate the caution that you and I think I have, and I expect the commission does, about sort of launching into a era of or launching down a path of sort of centralized response. I think that's not the intent here. What's envisioned with this, particularly the first recommendation, which describes work in 2026 on proposals for possible institutional integration. What's envisioned is a series of conversations with universities, starting and focused especially on those that are interested in having the conversation, to identify and explore opportunities for partnership that could help to sustain access and opportunities for students while over time lowering costs or avoiding cost increases. I think that the failure to go down that path means that we are likely to experience at many of our universities the same thing that we have been experiencing over the last several years, which is these very, very difficult budget cuts that have negative impacts on students and communities. And again, I want to be careful not to suggest that this adopting this report or the legislature taking up these recommendations somehow obviates the need for any of that. Doesn't make those financial realities immediately go away. But it does put some different options on the table. So I think I want to be careful not to sort of accept the framing that it's sort of all one or the other, right? Or that this is some like a massive pivot or paradigm shift, but it would represent an evolution and it would create some additional options that and possibilities that today I think we are not deeply enough exploring.
Other comments or questions?
Chair Heyman, it appears that Commissioner Dembro and Commissioner Middleton have hands up.
Great. Commissioner Dembro.
And I'm sorry, my internet is very sketchy, so I'll try my best. Just a few things. I want to remind us that this report came at the request of the Ways and Means Subcommittee, and I think that part of what drove that request was a sense that the universities were not doing that they were not being as efficient as they could be, and that they needed to show efficiency before they could ask the legislature for more money. I think that this report shows very clearly that the universities have been working hard to contain costs, and I find it full of very useful information along those lines. In addition, it once again reminds us of just how far behind the other states Oregon's funding of higher education is. And I think anything that we do needs to be accompanied by calling on the legislature, whether or not they have the means to do it today, to as soon as possible, and certainly commit to at least bringing us to the national average or the regional average. And if that were the case, I think that would be extremely helpful for our institutions. I do want to echo that as I read this report, what it's calling for is the beginning of a process to look at ways in which the administrative that could be beneficial for the institutions, including for our community colleges, to be honest. And so I think that is a pursuit worth doing. That was a recommendation. I want to remind the commission, and I think it's pointed out in the report, that NCHEMS, the National Center for Higher Education Management, did a report at the request of our university presidents that showed that Oregon could be doing much more along these lines as our as other states are doing. You know, when the HECC statutes were first developed in 2013 with House Bill 3120, they were done at the same time that the institutional boards were created. And the HECC was deliberately created in order to maintain the statewide focus on higher education. That we all, including our institutional boards, have a fiduciary responsibility, not just to their own institutions, but to the state as a whole and the students of the state as a whole. That sentiment was actually reaffirmed by the legislature just a couple of years ago in Senate Bill 273, when it called on the institutional boards to, to be cognizant of their fiduciary responsibility to the state as a whole and to all the potential students out there. I think that what we need to remind ourselves of is part of the problem that we're facing is not enough Oregonians are accessing higher education. These enrollment declines have driven a lot of the challenges that we face. And there are many, many, many Oregonians out there who need to be brought back or brought into higher education. And that needs to be the real mission of all the colleges. How can we get more students into higher education? And that may require a degree of partnership among the institutions that we don't have at the moment, and that we could have more of. So I think that's what this report really is calling for. Oh, I'm sorry. While I still seem to have internet that works, I do want to make one other point. Number 2, that recommendation is not giving the HECC authority to assess the quality of individual programs, and certainly not the content of them, and how they may not be aligned with some political agendas, et cetera. I think that's that was implied by a couple of the comments. I don't see that at all. What is being talked about here is when the courses, when the programs are no longer meeting the mission of the state in terms of their enrollments, the necessity of the program, the duplications. When we created the HECC, we gave the HECC authority to approve new programs. And that is already a very important function of this commission. The individual boards recommend new programs. They approve new programs, but then they have to come to the commission for the commission's approval. And that's because the commission is then looking at it through the filter, through the lens of the state as a whole. And I think that is really the intent of this recommendation, number 2. And for myself that I would not support this proposal if it meant that putting a program through some kind of political filter or some kind of ideological filter. I don't believe that is the intent. And I hope my fellow commissioners would agree with that. Thanks for your indulgence. Mr.
Thank
Chair.
you, Commissioner Devlin, Dembro. Just to clarify, and we are running up against our time frame here, and Ben, I don't know if you want to clarify this further, but there's no way in which recommendation number 2 is intended to supplant the work of the individual institutions. By a variety of reasons, having been a president for numerous years, program review is a mandated work of the institution by their accrediting agency, and this would in no way change that. What it does is address an additional set of issues, which I think, as Commissioner Dembro has pointed out, there's an intent from the beginning for the commission to be aware of programmatic offerings and opportunities from that perspective at the state level. It's a different dimension. It's not a replacement for, or in any way would diminish the work of the individual institutions with regard to that. We are pushing up against our time limit. I'm going to call on Commissioner Davis Boucher and give you a chance to enter into this conversation.
Thank you, Chairman Heyman. My first comment slash clarification question is regarding recommendation number 3. I think that it's a great idea to suggest to the legislature to have a separate pool specifically for increasing labor costs, because I know that various universities have been, the workers have been unionizing, pushing for as high as 24. I know U of O pushed it up to at least like 18, if I'm not mistaken. And so currently SOU is the minimum wage offered is about 15. And so I guess my clarification question comes in to where, because I was looking at the documents, and so I know that it makes up to like 70 to 80% of all E&G spending. And so I didn't see where, if it was specifically like asked, and again, I'm not sure if this is based on the discretion of the legislature, but where would these funds be coming from specifically? And because my fear is that Oregon taxpayers are not going to want to have a new tax just for the specific thing, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
The report and the recommendation does not address the specific question of where the legislature would draw the resources to support the appropriation of a salary pool for essential compensation increases.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
if I might comment also, the legislature historically, at least over the last 20 or 30 years, has always set aside a salary pool. Now they set aside a salary pool for state employees and also for non-state employees, but they identify those employees specifically. They're largely home care workers and others. They just no longer set aside a pool for higher ed employees. So this process of setting aside money for other collective bargaining agreements is sort of a standard practice in the legislature now, with the exception of the universities.
Thank you so much for that clarification. Commissioner Lawson, I'm going to give you the chance to short last question or comment. Thank you.
Of course. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I did just want to ask if I could request a roll call vote when we go to this action item.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
That's great. We are at the end of our time together. Is anybody prepared to make a motion?
This is
I
Gail.
move
I
that-
move to accept the
well-
report. Go ahead.
Sounds like
I didn't catch who that was.
Gail made a motion. I'll second it.
Okay, you got that. Thank you so much. Assuming we've had our conversation, can we move forward with a roll call, Guthrie?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I will now call the roll. Greg Heyman, how do you vote?
Yes.
Emily Simnett, how do you vote?
Yes.
Demetrius Davis Boucher, how do you vote?
Yes.
Michael Dembro, how do you vote?
I vote aye.
Richard Devlin,
Aye.
Helen Edwards,
Yes.
Arnel Fajardo,
I vote yes.
Evelyn Coker,
No.
Devin Lawson,
No.
Teresa Martinez,
Yes.
Eric Njue,
Yes.
Jen Proctor Andrews,
Yes.
Mary Middleton,
Yes.
Jennifer Smith,
Yes.
Gail Yamasaki.
Yes.
Thank you. That is our roll call vote, and the motion carries.
What is the total vote, Guthrie?
The total vote is 13-4-2 against, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you so much for that summary. I believe we have come to the end of this meeting. I really want to thank you for your engagement. This is a important, challenging conversation. This certainly sets a framework for some very important work going forward. And I'm feeling good about the foundation we have set for that work. So thank you. Thank you, Ben, for your work on this. Thank your staff for all the work that you've done to put together this report on the supporting data. And I look forward to work with all of you as we move forward with this. And with that, this meeting is adjourned.